Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dr. Molly Pepper, the Associate Dean for Undergraduate Programs here in the School of Business. Welcome to Mondays at noon. This is our weekly forum where we gather as a community to talk about things that are important to us. I want to mention that we are recording this session and it will be available on YouTube later. So this week we're doing something a little bit different. We're talking about the Pulse Survey that we sent to our students to ask them some questions about how the semester was going and belonging, inclusion, and equity in our classrooms. So I think the first thing I need to do is introduce our committee. We're the Belonging, Inclusion, Equity Committee, and our charge is to provide leadership to the School of Business to create an inclusive and equitable school with high levels of belonging. And I co-chair this committee with Maureen Duclos, who's here, and with several other colleagues, including Yemisi Awatoye, Ryan Herzog, Sarah Kern, Adrian Lighthouser, Mariella Zavala, and Peggy Sue LaRaz. I believe we've got everyone on this call today. So I'm looking forward to talking about the survey, the results. We sort of split the survey results up and analyzed it in pieces, and we're going to talk about each piece. So just real quick, we use the term belonging instead of diversity. You'll hear a lot of DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and we've chosen to go with BIE, which is belonging, inclusion, and equity, in part because diversity just means representation, where inclusion means we have intentional and ongoing engagement. But we really wanted to include belonging because belonging is that emotional connection that we feel to each other. And that's really our goal, that we are a community, and in a community, everyone should have that emotional connection and feel like they belong. Okay, so that's the committee. And the survey we did had 4 questions, 4 open-ended questions on it. For a short survey, it was actually quite rich in topics. So we asked the students to tell us about a class that was going well, who was teaching it and why it was going so well. A question about what had been addressed in their classrooms around belonging, inclusion, and equity, what resources students felt they needed, and then anything else that they wanted to tell us about. So we're going to address the first question separately. It was this question. We appreciate all the students who gave us good news about their classes and their professors, and the faculty are going to discuss this. We've given that information to the dean. There were some comments that were not kudos, that a certain class wasn't going particularly well. We also gave that information to the dean. So we're not going to be discussing this question today, but we will be following up on it. For the rest of our time together, what I want to do is go over these questions one at a time and ask my colleagues on the committee to discuss the question that they spent some time analyzing. So I'm going to call on Ryan Herzog and Adrian Lighthouser to tell us a little bit about this question. What have your professors done to address belonging, inclusion, and equity in your fall and spring classes? Tell us what information we got and any questions you have for us, or take questions from the crowd.
So I'll start. And one of the things, I guess, when we look at this question is there seems to be a little bit of misunderstanding on both potentially faculty and students as to why this isn't an important issue for us to address in the classroom. And so one of the things Adrian and I both said that we want to reiterate is, if you look at both the mission statement of the university and of the School of Business, or even the ethos statement of the School of Business, is where it really shows up. There are statements where, in the ethos statement, our professional aspirations reflect the educational mission of which we are a part, a commitment to the intellectual rigor, personal development, a passion for social justice, and an active engagement in our communities. And then in the mission statement, we specifically say for the university, right, experiences, the Gonzaga experience fosters a mature commitment to the dignity of the human person, social justice, diversity, intercultural competence, global engagement, solidarity with the poor and vulnerable, and care for the planet. So our point is, one of the questions or one of the responses was heavily on, well, not all classes need to do this, or it's okay if this one does it. There was this disconnect between what we were doing. And when professors did do it, some of the students questioned why they were doing it. And so one of the pieces that we know came out of the survey was the need to educate both students and faculty as to why belonging, inclusion, and equity is an important part of our classes. It's partly why students come here.
And I think, you know, to Ryan's point, some students said, for example, well, nothing much was said in this area, or nothing much, you know, we don't cover any of this material, but that's okay because I get it in arts and sciences, or I get it in the core, right? As though that's somebody else's job. And so again, that sort of disconnect, I think that students perceive that not much is being done in their business classes. Whether they think that's okay or not, I think that might speak to a discussion that we have with the faculty about how we intentionally integrate these things into our courses. But that assumption that it's going to get taken care of elsewhere, you know, I think that's something that we need to overcome, especially as we look at our vision that says that, you know, that we want to be a global leader in Jesuit business education, and the Jesuit means something in that statement, right? And Ryan pointed to some of the things that it means. And then I also want to recognize that some of these nothings or not much, I think, you know, just from my own experience of getting reflections from classes, even right after we've had some discussions, is that oftentimes it seems as though students maybe don't categorize the things the way that you're categorizing them in classes for the faculty who are here. So faculty might experience, no, we had this great robust conversation about this topic that ties to equity and inclusion and diversity. Students might not be seeing that in the same way. So I think another takeaway we had from this is, where we are doing that work is being very intentional about calling out why we're doing it and that we're doing it, so that it resonates a little bit differently with the students, hopefully.
Yeah, and I mean, one of the things that came across in the survey results was following the Black Student Union Zoom bombing event, or Zoom bombing incident. Most faculty in some capacity addressed it, right? And there was no comments that so-and-so did a horrible job addressing it. It was that they addressed it. And that was what mattered, was that you acknowledged this happened, that you were there for students. So it wasn't, you could have totally have, I mean, to a degree, not covered it well, but as long as you addressed it in some manner. Obviously, going forward, how we address these things is probably going to be important, but right off the bat, just acknowledging, hey, this happened, you know, that's not who we are, you know, you're welcome here. Just basic statements reassured a lot of the students that you were doing something good and they felt welcome.
Yeah, and I think, you know, that speaks to recognizing that although we only have one student here who's a GA, right? We don't have any students here right now, but this is being recorded in case students look at it later. I think it's important that this seems, these results that pretty much every professor, they said something or did something to acknowledge what happened with the Zoom bombing, is, at least it seems to be a change from even how we were addressing some of these things last spring. And I think that speaks to the intentional work that faculty and staff have been doing in our monthly meetings, including just, you know, sharing with each other how to better navigate some of these issues, and the importance of reaching out to students and to talk about these current events as they're happening. To make that time and space. So I think that work that we have started much more intentionally this fall, I think that speaks to us continuing to do that work and continuing to be a good learning community and helping each other. We also, through this survey, have, a number of shout outs to faculty who have really integrated issues around belonging and diversity and equity and inclusion in their classes. And so we can also think about, as a faculty and staff, what other sorts of learnings that we're interested in, and who we might look to be able to help us all become better as we're interacting with our students, and help us come up with those strategies and ways to integrate those things. So I hope that we continue to do that work as we've done over this last year.
And I'll add, follow up with Adrian, is that's what students want, because one of the comments, or a few of the comments, were, well, a lot of this stuff was addressed in the syllabus, but there wasn't a lot of effort or intention made to follow up on it. So, hey, you welcomed me the first day, but then you kind of forgot about me the rest of the semester. So being intentional, right? Following up when these events keep occurring, right? So we had a lot of positive feedback around Black Student Union, but not around some of the Asian hate events that occurred, right? So it seems like faculty did really good addressing one, and then kind of let another one slip by without addressing some of those concerns. So we need to kind of be persistent and follow up with these students on a regular basis to show that we do care, because I know we all care and want students to feel welcome, right? And so we just want to make sure we are doing that little piece.
Yeah, and then I want to add to that. So this is more dealing with the current events and things, but another piece of belonging that got brought up was around faculty who made use of those wellness slides that Brian Steverson made available for us through the Office of Health Promotion. I think I got that right. Okay, from the OHP. But that some of the resources in there, because for those of you who didn't look at those slides, people were playing them at the beginning of class, and some of the resources in there are around substance use and abuse, around mental health support, resources and support. And those specifically were pointed to as another way to create a space of belonging, a sense of belonging in the classroom. So thinking about whether, and those slides will likely be available again, continue to be available, or we can make our own, but being real intentional about sharing resources with students is something else that was pointed out as reassuring and helped them feel like they were supported in the classroom, and that the professor wasn't going to, I guess, judge them if they came to them with some of these issues, right? So it helped to open the door for us to be able to also be able to provide those resources and support one-on-one. So thinking about, do you just put it in your syllabus and then never go back to it, which I think is sort of normal because we never had these slides before, or is this something that you're bringing up throughout the semester to remind students that they have these resources? Those sorts of things can help normalize, and that's some of the language, the comfort of some of the particularly mental health struggles being normalized was really helpful for a number of students. So I think that sort of covers our area, but I'd be curious if anyone has any questions or suggestions for next steps based on this information.
Yeah, I think one of the clear next steps just from the survey was being intentional and following up on a regular basis.
I wonder, Adrian and Ryan, because this was your area, about that, sort of going beyond the syllabus, and the first day of class, syllabus day, I always say, hey, I know it's boring to be given this document and then have someone talk about it with you, and clearly you are capable of reading it and understanding it. But I feel like if that somehow discussing the syllabus makes a difference, because students who miss that first day of class, they just miss something intangible about how the class is going to come together, I think. And yeah, I just wonder if you have any thoughts about how do we get back to the syllabus more often, back to that intangible piece of the class, or anyone. Sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but that's what I'm thinking about.
So I usually get to syllabus on day 2 in hopes that I get more students, that people that are moving around, that I'm more likely to have a full class, and then use day 1 to do the sort of first step of norm setting, and then we continue that after the syllabus. But I mean, I think that those slides, are helpful. I think I know that we all have a lot of content that we want to get through in our classes, but it doesn't take all that long to just do sort of a temperature check to check in with how students are doing. And they appreciate when you share, wow, I'm really stressed out, and have that conversation, right? That could be 3 minutes. So I think that there are ways that we can bring it in throughout. I'm not good at going back to the actual document. So I would love to hear other people's suggestions about that, because I kind of, I'm not great at doing that, but hope that we practice sharing the resources and support that are in that document throughout the semester, but I'm not very good at intentionally going back and pointing to it in the document itself.
Well, we can't solve it all today, but Adrian, maybe you and I will have some more conversations about how we do this. And I really like your idea to do the syllabus on day 2 and spend day 1 just doing some norm setting. That's helpful as well. Okay, well, that was question 2. I'm going to put question 3 on the screen real quick. So following that question about, what BIE things were done in the classroom, we asked this question about what can the School of Business do or provide that would help you in the future? And Sarah Kern and I examined the answers to this question, and really kind of led to more questions. Sarah, did you want to say anything before I put our questions up?
It would help if you put the responses up.
Okay, so these were 2 questions on the answers that we had. These are, it would be nice if there were resources for people taking business classes who are not majoring in the field. And then the second one, lower standards for classes, fewer exams and assignments. So let's talk about the first one. Jump in if you have some perspective on what is the concern maybe that students are expressing here. I mean, we certainly want to meet their concern, but we're a little fuzzy on what that concern is. Anyone have insights?
Molly and I were left kind of scratching our heads kind of on both of these. I think my first thought on this first one had been the only thing that I'm aware of that we provide to business students who are that we maybe don't provide to other students who are not at least majoring and minoring in business students would be Molly's weekly email. But I'm not sure if that's what this was getting at.
What do they mean lower standards for classes?
No clue. Molly and I talked about this a bit, and lower standards to get into the class, lower standards for getting an A in the class.
I also wondered if this was that we did hear in other questions that students felt there were too many assignments, that there was too much work put on them, and maybe that was where this was coming from, or is it something else? I mean, we don't want to assume, and these are questions that we have.
Yeah, I don't want to assume, but I do know that I heard from students, and this isn't just in the School of Business, but across the board, feeling like there were actually more expectations from classes that were Zoom classes than there were in-person classes. Whether that's, I'm not sure whether that's what this is referring to, whether that's accurate or whether that's accurate or not, but there's at least a perception amongst a number of students that they have more requirements, particularly with the Zoom only classes. So maybe it's specific to that, to this delivery of this year.
For the first question, the first bullet point, I have an example, a student that comes to mind with these resources. He's not a major, so a business major, and he's a transfer student that came in during this year where he's not really on campus. So he doesn't really feel part of the Gonzaga community at all. And he was talking to me about just general tips and how to, manage another field, but through a business perspective, and just resources like that. And then that's when he told me, well, I was asking him about networking and things like that. And he said, well, I'm not sure because I really don't feel like I'm part of Gonzaga. And then I'm not even a business major. So I feel disconnected from the business school. So I'm guessing that's something around that, that's related to that. For people taking business classes, but that are not majors.
That's a great perspective, Mariella. And I mean, that's what we're all about, right? We want that belonging. We want people to feel like they're a part of our community. So that is a concern. On the second comment, I also heard the things Adrian discussed about students feeling there was more work to be done, that some professors were saying, I made the test harder because you're doing it on Zoom. I feel like we're not able to do as much in class, so I'm going to give you more homework. And I think that may be where that comes from. We had another set of questions for you, which the students asked for more resources on. They wanted free tutoring and mental health resources and career resources and personal connections out in the business world. And we certainly do have all of these available. Why don't our students know about it? Any insights on how we get that word out?
TikTok.
Is that Peggy Sue? Who was that?
Yeah, that was me. I think you should make weekly TikToks.
Oh,
I was just about to say, I don't think they're reading their email. That's part of the challenge. I know they're not reading the emails that I send them as their professors. So the idea that they're reading general School of Business emails might be a high expectation. And so if we keep mentioning these things in the weekly email, they're there, but it really doesn't get it in front of the students. So maybe we need to think about putting these on those slides ahead of class. Of course, if we're no longer in Zoom format, though, then how are we going to get this message out there?
I think it's easier for me, like my students don't come in to my Zoom class until the hour, but when we're back in person, I actually think it would be easier to be running slides at the start of class, that there's more chance that they'd see them. But that's just my anecdotals, my students.
Is there something we can do on the SBA website to make it more user-friendly to find these things? I mean, Molly's got a great blog, but I don't know how many students go to it.
I don't think they go to the SBA website either.
I like Peggy Sue's idea of, if not TikTok, at least find out where they do go.
Okay, question for students. Where would you go to get your information?
I think just reiterates real quick, Molly, the need for us to have it on the board before class or a reminder in class, because we can sit here and brainstorm a million places. They're not going to click on a link in an email. They're not going to go to the SBA website. They might remember if you remind them in class and have a link on Blackboard when they sign into Blackboard. That's the only thing they'll see.
Brian, that actually does give me a great idea to see if there's functionality in Blackboard to send these messages out. I mean, I know individual professors can do it, and I just wonder if there's a school-wide way to have that on all our pages.
I mean, I think it's right now, that's the one link that every student is going on every day.
Mhm. Okay, well, this session just paid for itself. If that works out, that's a great idea. I like it a little better than TikTok. Not an expert on that.
I
We
thought
need
Peggy
a little
was,
dancing emoji.
was volunteering herself for the TikToks.
I'm getting a no from Peggy Sue over there. All right, well, let's move to the last question on the survey, which was, please tell us anything else you'd like for us to know about your classes in the School of Business this year. And Maureen Duclos and Mariela Zavala analyzed this one for us.
Yeah, so we saw a variety of different topics in this other question. So first, yeah, so there were a few comments on lack of individual motivation and just trying to stay engaged in their online classes. And then in addition to that, with that lack of individual motivation and recognizing that in their own peers as well, they voice concern in group projects. So they're finding it really hard to get those done. And right now, especially as we're wrapping up, there were some comments on that, like it's hard to work with others, working groups, especially when motivation is so low. And then with class content, so they voiced concern that the classes are difficult. There's a lot of work, but then there were also they weren't seeing also the link between the outside classwork and then like the point of the class. So they weren't seeing the link between the outside assignments, outside homework, or professors were not repeating it or even addressing those outside assignments. So we had comments on that. There was also just general stress, general feelings of being overwhelmed and wishing to have some professor consideration of just the general situation. So I think the well-being slides were a good way to show this consideration, especially since we got some comments of students showing appreciation for those. And I think they really felt like what we were talking about just a second ago, how you feel in that first day when everybody's talking about trying to be successful in the class, and this is what we all need to do to be successful. Another thing that worked for me, which I didn't think was really a big deal, but every day I just asked them how they are before I start class. And I was actually not feeling great about this because I don't vary it. I don't ask fun questions or, something else that's exciting or entertaining. But they've mentioned to me that they really appreciated that, just to acknowledge their humanity. And I say things like, oh yes, we're almost there, hang on, I know we got to push a little harder. And I might also share, this is a busy week or something like that about what I'm going through, and they seem to appreciate that. And then one that I find like really valid and something that I haven't had any conversations about is concern for next semester and COVID safety. So there's also some student interest in retaining some of the elements that we adopted with online learning. So first, in terms of safety, students are concerned about the effectiveness of the vaccine in the first place against new strains. And they're wondering what our backup plans are for the fall semester. So sure, we're planning to be in person in the fall, but what if we need to go back to quarantine? Or what is plan B? What is plan C? We had a question, a comment, please make Zoom an option until for fall. There's so much uncertainty. Does the vaccine even work against new strains? Just give the option so that people can decrease the overwhelming stress of life. I had to move 5 times within the last year. I cannot afford this. So they're really concerned, just about what if we can't proceed as we're planning just to be all back in person next fall. Maureen, do you want to add to that?
No, you did a great job. I mean, I think maybe just to put the bookend on it and invite some comments or ideas from all of you. I think what I heard the most in many of the comments is that whole request for grace a little bit of, there's a certain level of frustration in their responses that I thought was predominant. And there were some really long answers. Yeah. So I just thought it was a good I thought it was a good reminder about that. I think they're asking for grace and the same way we are. So.
And maybe we are thinking it, right? And even we've made changes to the way we teach classes online, but we didn't say those things, or we didn't voice that empathy. I think they're actually just wanting to hear that, just to acknowledge the situation.
I don't know if anyone knows about the fall. Oh, and just as I said that, Ken Anderson put something in the chat. I don't know of anything set in stone for fall Wednesday. I'll be talking with the provost. So a little update there.
I wondered about not part of the questions that we have right in front of us here. I mean, these outcomes, but back to the transfer students. I was wondering if anybody has any thoughts or ideas about where it is and what it is we could do to address that lack of inclusivity. They've got to be onboarded at someplace. And I know, Jane, you probably talked to all of them, right?
I know they do have a central university onboarding. And it's, it's a consideration whether we could do more here in the School of Business as we bring them in.
Could we, is there a way to embed specifically School of Business messaging, BIE messaging really into that part of it?
I think that would be possible. I think, as someone who came into Gonzaga as a junior college transfer, it is a little bit rough because, you miss out I feel like that old dog food commercial, you miss out on the formative years of life, in Catherine Monica and Madonna, and Peggy Sue is smiling right now, thinking fondly of her days in CM. And, it's hard, right? I mean, you've missed a lot of the core classes. People have bonded. We don't do a tremendously large business in transfer students, not just institutionally, but in the business school. So I think some programming early on in September, it'll be easy enough to identify both 2-year and 4-year transfers. And I think some programming on our part would be a pretty easy way to make some progress in this area, because, we always talk about how special a place Gonzaga is, and how what a great community, and Zags for life and all of that. Well, a JUCO transfer is coming in halfway through all of that, right? And in some ways missing those real formative, that really formative time as a freshman or first-year student when you're away from home for the first time. So I think, looking at some sort of programming, whether it's just a little bit of a program and a little bit of a social or whatever, Molly, I think that would be a cool way to go.
I think that's a great, I also transferred, and it's also awkward because you're taking your upper division, in this case, business courses, while still having to take some classes with freshmen and sophomore in the core. And so it's disconcerting. It's hard to build community when you're sort of splitting the time in that way, and not having the same experiences as the people that you're then in your major classes with.
We have had some real specific and dedicated interest in the transfer student population from Colleen Vandenboom, who was the transfer coordinator. I'm not identifying her role very accurately, but she was responsible for the stuff, broadly speaking, to try to help transfer students feel at home. And there's even a location, an office in Hemmingson for that student population. She also took charge of the new student orientation events and academic and social stuff that were dedicated specifically to transfer students. And Gerhard and I have done a transfer student academic orientation several times, fall semester, spring semester, kind of part of the order of events during those dedicated days at the beginning of the semester. But this year, all kinds of things just sort of, the wheels kind of fell off. Colleen doesn't have that role anymore, and I'm not sure that anyone has been given the responsibility of coordinating that in a university-wide responsibility. Additionally, trying to get this transfer students organized and into Zoom new student orientation meetings was just so painful. I did it in the fall. It was so awkward the way that it was constructed in the Zoom / not Zoom a setup that they had. It just, technologically, it was pretty unsuccessful. We did have a transfer student, he may now have graduated, who was really active in kind of putting his arms around the transfer student group and making sure they all felt really great. But that was when we all, before COVID interrupted the way that group of very disparate people coming from all sorts of different academic positions, locations, they don't live on campus, so trying to get them to kind of be in a space together presents another set of challenges as well. I think if if it's at all possible to evaluate who university-wide heads that up, and then to take a dive into the business students, as Colleen did prior to her, getting another set of responsibilities, would be really, really helpful. This whole COVID thing has just decimated that particular approach to our new students. So I feel really badly for them. And my work with the transfer students this year as their academic advisor has been frustrating too, because they just don't feel, anecdotally, I don't have any sort of scientific information to back this up, but they're just all over the place, and they don't have a thing that they can hang on to that makes them feel like this is what Gonzaga is like. They just don't really know that yet.
I wonder, it makes me wonder about maybe this is too lofty and too big of a thing to take on, but a mentoring, peer-to-peer mentoring, like couldn't we figure out a way to connect them with an existing Gonzaga student, or even a club maybe takes that on as a...
Well, that's kind of what they had prior to COVID and prior to Colleen exiting that responsibility. She was really good at keeping them engaged. There's some holes in the system that we did have in place that I'm not sure have been filled. But yeah, the answer is yes, of course. That'd be, yeah, fab. And that's what this great kid did that was so empathetic, sympathetic, experienced with it, and really, put extraordinary effort forward on his part to engage that student population.
I know Peggy Sue joked just a second ago about TikTok, but I wonder if we could do this just on Facebook, on the Facebook page. I mean, they're on Blackboard for sure, but they're also for sure on social media as well. So maybe that's another way to post and summarize like the free tutoring, mental health resources, career resources, and maybe there connect them with some sort of peer, an existing Gonzaga student. I don't know, maybe try something with social media.
I think that sounds like a good idea, just running the social media for the business school. But as I think about it, a lot of our students aren't actually following our SBA page, and I don't know how to get them to follow our pages. And so if they're not already in the, algorithm to be, Facebook really picks who can see posts and things, I don't know how many we would hit / especially the students that need the attention or need the resources. So trying to figure out how we can target those students a little bit more, get them involved. I think it's a great idea. It's another resource to use.
I really loved Maureen's idea of the peer-to-peer mentoring thing, and whether a club might be able to take it on. That seems like something interesting that a group like AK Psi might be able to facilitate. I mean, they have in the past been a pretty well organized and pretty active group. They're all about the brotherhood, and so not everybody gets to be a member of AK Psi, but whether putting on their radar this as a project that AK Psi could take on as a way to contribute to the community of the school, it seems like an interesting way to go. And I kind of liked your earlier, Maureen, I feel like earlier you were maybe suggesting, or someone suggested something around like the idea of a social or something like that. So maybe like I could see something like that being the kind of event where you could sort of kick it off, right? Where you have transfer students there, but you also potentially have, an active group like AK Psi there. And it is meant to be a meet and greet, make some friends, speed dating in the School of Business, matchmaking, friend making kind of deal. Like it could be really fun, and a way to at least get started. Like sometimes there's just a little introduction that needs to be made, and it doesn't take that much for people to sort of find their footing, as long as they find like some entry point into some little group. So I really like those ideas.
I just want to, I know that people want to get back to normal, whatever that means or what that's going to look like. But at the Society for Business Ethics conference this past summer, we had the most successful networking event ever. And it was because we were on Zoom, and because we had former presidents in various Zoom rooms facilitating meet and greets. So people didn't have to go up to random people and have that sort of uncomfortable moment. So I think that there are also multiple venues that we can use to help support some of this that can hopefully appeal. You know, not all students are going to be great in person. So maybe we have another event that's a more virtual event, but that's facilitated so that people are talking in the rooms. But just, I think that some of these ideas would be great for when we're talking about belonging for all of our students, especially plugging in for transfer students, but for all of our students, this would be beneficial.
Adrian, I appreciate you bringing up kind of background to belonging and for everyone. And I love the idea of different methods to meet the students where they are.
Well, I think that might be something for us to consider, as Adrian is saying, whatever we are going to return to or make different in the fall semester. I had a Zoom meeting scheduled this morning. The student scheduled it herself. It wasn't my telling her to show up at this particular time. She was on my calendar for 10 o'clock in the morning. She didn't show up, and I looked into her, got her student profile up in front of me. She's in China, and her clock, she's 16 hours ahead of us, so it was 4 in the morning there. And I don't know if she realized when she scheduled this meeting what time it was in her world that this meeting was going to occur. And if she's going to be on campus in the fall, her sense of being a Gonzaga student is so different from someone who's going to school remotely. I have another student who's been all year in her bedroom in Wenatchee. And students in Vietnam and in Sweden, and I mean, they're all over the world. If they are coming here, they still are not, acculturated. They need the same sort of attention and transitioning and welcoming and being told that they belong as all of the transfer students. I mean, they're sort of in that same set of circumstances themselves. I think we've got a lot to just become aware of and understand as we get something going that's not what it has been this year, whatever that is. We've got a whole new basket of issues to understand and get in front of in the first place that maybe we hadn't identified as being sort of critical issues, wherever they're coming from or whatever they come back to as we get that off the ground.
Yeah, Jane, I appreciate that. I think you said it just really well. Getting a lot of good comments there in the chat too, with people agreeing and the dean saying, let's make it happen. So this was an odd year to begin to do our first pulse survey of students, but I'm glad we kicked this off. It gives us a lot of information about what our students need and want and the perceptions and how we can reach that goal of everyone feeling a part of the community and that feeling of belonging. So we're getting toward the top of the hour. So I want to thank everyone for being here. Thanks to the committee for analyzing the survey and reporting the results. And unless there's any last thoughts for the good of the order, I just want to say thanks, and we'll see you next Monday.